Hello and welcome to episode 12 of the Long Shot Podcast, brought to you by 342 Productions. I am your host, as always, Duncan Robinson, and of course, I'm here with my good friend and co-host, Davis Reid.
Yes, back again. What's up?
Not much. I'm here in Indianapolis, the home of the 2021 NCAA tournament.
Yes.
Which is pretty exciting. They're going through their own little rendition of the bubble. But I'm boots on the ground here in Indy. We're playing the Pacers here tomorrow. We're recording this on a Tuesday evening. But it's nice that I will say this, the city has some energy. Big time energy just walking around seeing all the banners. So it's nostalgic in some senses. In case anyone forgot, I made a trip to Monday night in my senior year with the Michigan Wolverines. So it is certainly nostalgic in that regard.
In case anyone forgot. Yeah, a subtle reminder there. We're hoping that Michigan can do the same.
Yeah, hopefully by this point when you guys are all listening, Michigan has secured their position in the Final Four, which should be on tap this weekend, which I have very little doubt in my mind. Looked great the other day in the Sweet 16, and I expect more of the same in the Elite Eight.
When you think back to your national championship run, is there a moment or a springboard or something that comes to mind?
I want to stop you there just because I don't want to be, guilty of, revising history. The national championship run makes it sound like I won a national championship.
Yeah, near national championship run, I should say. National championship game run.
Which I did not do, and I'm reminded about it often. I also did not play particularly well in the championship game. If there's one game that I'd like to have back, I try not to live with many regrets, but if there's one game going back that I could take back, it would certainly be that one on Monday night against Donte DiVincenzo and the Villanova Wildcats.
You said that exactly right. It's Donte DiVincenzo and the Villanova. Here's the thing. If it makes you feel any better, you could have played incredibly and it wouldn't really have made a difference. I don't think they were losing to anybody that night, regardless of how they were playing.
That gives me a little bit of peace in my heart and in my mind. But nonetheless, to go out like that, to end your college career, 5-year college career, by the way, as I've mentioned plenty of times, I took my time, did my 5 years, but to go out like that certainly hurt. And Donte, just everything he was throwing up was going in that night. And as you said, they put it on us pretty good.
I'll say this because you didn't answer my question, so I'll answer my own question. My favorite memory of that run, because I know that's what everybody wants to know, is the Elite Eight. The Sweet 16 and Elite Eight games were played in Los Angeles, where I was living at the time.
City of Angels.
The City of Angels. So I got to go to both of those games. And in the Elite Eight, you guys beat Florida State, and you hit sort of like a dagger 3 in the corner right in front of where I was with like 2 minutes left maybe to go up 10. And I'll never forget it. One of the biggest shots, I think at that point, one of the biggest shots of your career to send your boys to the Final Four. And I just remember the place went nuts. There were so many Michigan fans in that place. So side note, a lot of Wolverines in Los Angeles apparently, but it was electric.
Yeah, we had the Staples Center feeling like Chrysler Arena on campus in Ann Arbor. That was special. I had a bunch of family and friends in attendance. Probably my favorite part of that weekend were the activities that ensued afterwards.
I was going to go there. I didn't know if we should go there, but now we're here. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, we're here. We can paint a brief picture of what transpired. Nothing like totally out of the ordinary, but basically what happened is we end up in the Final Four. We beat Florida State in the Elite Eight. We have a week until we don't play again. And I just remember being in LA. I think it was like a Saturday night.
Yeah, I think it was.
It was a Saturday night in LA. Our game was over at like 8:30 or 9 because we had the earlier slotted game. And I just remember being like, we're going to the Final Four. Like, we have to celebrate in some capacity. And of course, at this point, I was 23 years old, so I was certainly allowed to at least enjoy an adult beverage if I so choose. But the creativity, basically, we get everyone together, and we decide that we're going to make a trip as a team, of course, out and just enjoy a little night in LA, and nothing crazy, nothing out of the ordinary. But the great thing about it was that nobody had any clothes. Like going out clothes or like casual clothes. We all had Michigan sweatsuits. So here we are just roaming the streets of Los Angeles in our Jordan jumpsuits. Very clearly the Michigan basketball team. Not that anyone really cares, but I will say, like, we got some acknowledgement and some love. But it was just funny to be out and about, a bunch of college kids out in LA, just trying to mix it up in the City of Angels. It was special, and you were there too for it, which made it all the more special.
Yeah, it was. I just fact checked. It was a Sunday night, actually. So a Sunday night in Los Angeles is, by no means dead. I think a Sunday night in Los Angeles is more poppin' than a Saturday in other parts of the country, but it wasn't a Saturday night. So limited options. But yes, just wanted to get out, see the town, enjoy a Final Four run. What I remember most of that night is that I came to the hotel that you guys were staying in, and the hotel lobby had set up like a little party for you guys after the game since you had won, and they catered In-N-Out. So there were In-N-Out burgers, just a stack of In-N-Out burgers. There was special music playing. There was like one mini bar set up, but no one knew if it was okay to drink or not because, like you said, you were 23. Like most of those guys are of age, but it's also still a college team and your college coaches are around. So there was this kind of strange tension of eating In-N-Out burgers and then should we have a vodka soda or do we skip the mini bar?
Yeah, there's definitely a strange dynamic. If I remember correctly, you certainly weren't skipping any sort of mini bar.
Well, I was not a college athlete at that time. Right. Important to know. Yeah.
Anyways, that's just some good old fashioned nostalgia, bringing it back to the.
Wait, you never answered my question. Is there a game or a moment or a memory from that run that sticks out most?
Interesting. I mean, I'll say this, and I'm going to transition into a little bit more serious tone. I think for me, the springboard moment happened earlier in the year, actually, and I've talked about this before, when I was actually taken out of the starting lineup and essentially benched for Isaiah Livers, who's now gone on to be a big time player. It was at the time, but I was a senior who had started most of my career, or at least more than half of my career at Michigan at that point. And I got pulled out of the starting lineup because basically we weren't really playing that well, and I wasn't really playing that well. And of course, at that point, I'm a senior. This was January, I think. We had just played Purdue, and Isaiah had played a lot more than me, and it was kind of like trending that direction. And I remember getting the text from Coach Beeline saying, "Hey, will you come in tomorrow? I want to talk to you before practice," and just kind of seeing the writing on the wall of, all right, this is going to be exactly what I think it is, and him telling me that I was getting pulled from the starting lineup, and it was an incredibly challenging thing to hear for a senior. I have all these aspirations of helping lead this team to a national championship, Big Ten championship, and then, of course, also developing and building a resume to ultimately try to play professionally. And it was just kind of this moment where I just saw everything kind of slipping away. And it was a tough conversation to have. And, I think the reason that it ultimately ended up being a springboard is that it helped shape my really perspective for the remainder of the year. And that I had a couple days after it where, I wasn't sulking. Like, I was still a good teammate and supportive and tried to support Isaiah and the rest of the group. But there was definitely some like, oh, this is so unfair, this and that, just natural things that you have in a moment like that. But there was a very distinct conversation that I had with a good friend of mine where I realized I needed to shift my perspective and embrace it for what it was. Nothing was going to change, but instead the only thing I could change was my perspective moving forward, and that would allow me to, star in my new role and whatever that was going to be. And ultimately by the end of the year, I was, playing 30 minutes a game anyway, so it didn't really matter. But it was definitely, I was forced to kind of deal with the fact that I wasn't in that role that I had always envisioned myself, particularly in my senior year. So I think that we changed as a team when I started coming off the bench. It provided us a little bit more depth. It gave us, some flexibility with rotations and doing some different things. And I started to play better as well. Truth be told, the first half of my senior year, I didn't play very well. And the second half, I really started to make some shots and do some things to really help us win. So I think that moment of kind of the slap in the face, the shock of getting pulled out of the starting lineup ultimately ended up kind of being that springboard for my success, but then ultimately the team's success.
Yeah. It's controlling what you can control, which is always easy to say. Like the saying is easy to keep in mind, but to actually practice that and put that into motion is a different thing. I feel like Jamie on Joe Rogan, I just have, the facts in front of me here. You started your senior year, 19 games, came off the bench 22. And like you said, you played a lot better that second half of the season coming off the bench. You go on to win Big Ten Sixth Man of the Year, which should that have an asterisk next to it? Because you started half the season.
Yeah, that was a pretty anticlimactic award. I mean, I'm not like scoffing at it, but it was like, it was kind of like, well, I feel like I should be a starter anyways.
I mean, we'll take it. We'll add the hardware. Yeah,
for sure. Certainly not complaining by any respects. But yeah, back to your point, control what you can control. Like the other side of that too is like the classic line that every coach always tells their team is like, we need to learn how to like sacrifice, and like people are going to need to sacrifice in this locker room. And that word that gets thrown around a lot, and sacrificing is really easy until it's you who has to do the sacrificing. Sure. And then all of a sudden it starts to shift where it's like, yeah, if you're the best player on the team taking all these shots and playing whatever minutes a game, it's like, it's easy to tell that guy to sacrifice who's not in that role. But for me, that was like it was a harsh realization of like, okay, this is my sacrifice. This is what I can bring to this team. And I also think it really helped me grow as a leader as well, and helped me find my voice as a leader, because it built in some credibility in that I think I handled the situation of, essentially the optics of it being benched for a freshman. I handled it well to the point where I could then hold people accountable if other people weren't acting right in terms of complaining about shots or minutes. It's like, hold on here. Like if anybody has a right to complain, it's me. And the point being is that I was trying my hardest not to, and I thought I was pretty good about it. And that ultimately allowed us to like unlock another level as a team, which ended up working out, of course.
Yeah. Big Ten tournament champions, run to the national championship, Final Four run. You played well through that stretch. I know you don't think you played well in the national championship game, but again, it didn't matter. Villanova was going to beat you guys anyway.
Yeah, probably. I think they had like 5 or 6 NBA players on that team. Anyways, I was going to bring it a little bit more current day, talk a little NBA basketball. We are coming off a trip to New York. Only played one game, but we were there for an elongated weekend, which was nice. It was great to see the city of New York back up and kind of bumping again. Saturday in particular was a beautiful day out. We had the day off. Went for a nice stroll around the city, which was fun.
What's it like to be an NBA player in New York City who can't go do anything? Is it tempting? I assume it's hard.
There's some challenges, but I don't like that you said we can't do anything. Like I said, I mean, Saturday, as long as you're socially distanced and you're being safe, yeah, we can't do many of the normal activities that you would maybe normally enjoy in a bumping city like New York, like go out to dinner or catch up with friends, like that sort of thing. But I was able to go for a nice walk. One thing that I've come to miss living in Miami is seasons. Seasons are incredibly underrated. And Agreed. Saturday in New York City just felt like a spring day. And I was loving it. Let me tell you that. We also came out in New York City with a W. We were fortunate enough to come out on top against the Knicks. And it was great to be back in Madison Square Garden with fans. We had played there earlier this year and there was nobody, but it was nice to get some people back in the seats. Just that ambiance and that feeling in there that you get. Obviously it wasn't a packed MSG, but just any fans at all felt normal, or close to normal, getting back to normal, I should say.
So 2 things. 1, my brother and my cousin were there. So shout out to both of them. I think they brought good juju to Miami. Secondly, there were courtside folks. Jack Harlow, Pete Davidson amongst them. But that was the first time I remember watching a game this season with people that close to the court. Had you seen that in any other arenas?
I think there was one other arena that had it. I'm blanking on it right now. Well, actually in Miami, we're starting to do it. So that's one, but I still think there's another one that I cannot place. But yeah, I mean, of course, MSG, you got to have Celebrity Row, right?
Yeah, it's part of the experience.
100%. And yeah, as you said, they were down there. Jack and Tyler had their little moment after the game. The jersey swap. The jersey swap, of course, which was special. But yeah, it was just, of course, it just contributes to the ambiance of MSG. But like I said, it was great to get out of there with a win. That's for sure.
Yeah. You also had one of my favorite shots of yours this season so far, the end of shot clock spinning fade away 3 at the end of the shot clock. I usually, as a supporter, don't love when you get the end of the shot clock bomb because it's typically a difficult shot. But you somehow found a way for that one to drop, which was fun.
Yeah, that was an interesting one. Right near the Knicks bench, they were all sounding off, as the shot clock was winding down, because it looked like I was kind of dead in the water there, which I really was, to be honest with you. RJ Barrett had actually played some pretty good defense, and I just kind of turned around and heaved it up there. And like I said, they were sounding off, and when it went in, I turned and I just said, "Yeah, I work on that." And I walked back, which clearly I don't actually work on that, but in the moment it was, I just had to let him know.
This is incredible. I didn't know that. I was going to ask because it looked like you said something. I work on that is beautiful. And this is another example. We talked about this last week. Another example of you talking a little shit. Like, here's the thing. If all these stories I hear, the catch I keep high, the I work on that, the I'm cooking now, like none of it is aggressive. Like, I'm not putting you in like the KG tier of trash talk, but it's still there. It's still there. It's somewhere it's somewhere in between, no trash talk at all and like the top tier guys. You're falling in the middle somewhere.
I don't know if it's trash talk as much as it is just making live time observations,
Right, fine.
I'm just kind of acknowledging what's going on in the moment. And I am, maybe I'm vocalizing it, which I guess would maybe fall under the category of trash talk, but it's not like personal by any means. I'm not taking shots at anybody, but more so just, some good old fashioned back and forth.
I would let that slide if it was truly just an observation. Like, that's catch high, keep high. I guess that's an observation. I'm cooking now is somewhat
is also potentially an observation.
But I work on that is just not true. I know for a fact you don't work on that shot. So that one dips into shit talking, I think.
Yeah, there's a fine line there. I guess it's hard to say what side of it we fall on.
So you've now played a game with Bielitsa, have not played with Vic yet. But it made me think, when you add guys to a roster, is enough of what's going on around the NBA similar that these guys can just sort of be thrown in to offensive and defensive schemes and just kind of pick it up? Or is there like a whole new playbook that these guys need to learn? And so there's going to be a learning curve with guys all around the league, but then particularly in Miami.
Some of the terminology and some of the calls are specific place to place. In general, though, a lot of the actions, a lot of the kind of schemes and systems are pretty much recycled. I mean, there's kind of like I don't know if you call it a joke, but maybe like an inside little anecdote, I guess, that everyone just runs the same stuff. It's all kind of recreated and rebranded, and there might be little tweaks here and there based off of team personnel or, a coach's preference on how they want to do a certain thing. But in general, like I was talking to Belly during one of our shoot-arounds. I was just kind of talking him through something, and I was asking him, how similar this was to, where he had been before in Sacramento and Minnesota. And he had just kind of made that same sort of comment, and that like it's a little different here because I think Miami prides themselves on doing stuff a little bit different. But he's like, at the end of the day, basketball is just basketball, and it's a lot of the same actions. It's a lot of playing off of each other, player movement, ball movement, all that sort of stuff. So I think that particularly early on. Like I was talking to Belly because Vic, I haven't played with Vic yet. Obviously, he didn't play in that New York game, but just talking to Belly, and he was just like, it's been a whirlwind just since the trade. He flew to Miami, flew up to New York. He's been bouncing around, and I think probably the place that he's the most comfortable is on the basketball court. Like just because it's something that we're all familiar with.
Yeah, that makes sense. I wonder, or I assume there's also some changes that then need to be made from you guys too. Like it's not that just Belly needs to come in and figure out the Heat offense, but it's also that you guys need to start tailoring some of those actions that you run for him and for Vic and start to incorporate some things that work for these new guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think a good amount of that burden falls on the staff, right? And that they need to figure out how to put those guys in situations to be successful. I think the area where it really comes down to the players is just learning to really play with one another. I mean, that's something that I really can't like overstate enough of its importance, is like building a rapport between teammates and an understanding of where you're going to be on the floor. I think probably the best example I've ever experienced of that is last year's bubble run in the playoffs, to the point where we just had such great continuity and understanding of where everyone was going to be, tendencies, where people, liked to be on the floor, how people were going to move without the ball, what people were going to do with the ball, how they were going to react to certain defensive schemes, to the point where it's like, when you really get it humming, particularly offensively, and obviously defensively, of course, too, because, trust and being able to rely on people in the right spots. But if you really want to have an effective and dynamic offense, so much of it is reliant not on, where coaches put you X's and O's, but more so how you're able to actually play off of one another, and if the pieces really fit. So in that regard, it's going to take some time to really develop that rapport. But I think that's part of why they have the trade deadline when they do, is that they give teams time to really round into form before the games really, really start to matter come the playoffs.
Got it. Yep, makes sense. Another question then, because that's interesting to hear you say that a lot of guys or a lot of teams sort of run the same thing, same actions. Like you said, at the end of the day, it's just kind of playing basketball, understanding your teammates, understanding their tendencies, all that stuff. My cousin plays, my cousin, he plays in Miami for the Dolphins, backup quarterback. Shout out to Reid. And I remember we went out to lunch and he was talking to us about how in the NFL, it's very clear the coaching tree lineage, because certain teams have certain schemes that are so similar, like the Andy Reid offense or the Belichick defense.
Yeah.
Is it the same way in the NBA then, where like you can look at coaching staffs and then when those guys break off and get jobs elsewhere, you can assume that they're sort of running the same things?
I think where you really can tend to see that is actually defensively. I think that offensively is different because the game has just changed so much. And if you're not going to change with the game, it's like kind of like that adapt or die type of thing. If you're running offense, that the same offense you were running in 2011, 2010, like maybe an occasional set here or there, but if you're running like to get mid-range twos and work, bigs in the post, like you're just not going to be able to score enough points to win. So as a result, you've seen pretty much every team. That's why like the offensive stuff is so repetitive, because everyone's working to get threes, layups, and free throws. That's just how the game boils down now. But where I think you really see that lineage in those trees are defensively, in that there are teams that are just like, honestly, the Knicks are a great example. Like a Tom Thibodeau coach team, the game is going to be in the mud. And that's just how it goes. Like last night, it was 98-88. That was the final score. Pretty infrequent to see in 2021 two NBA teams score under 100. It's just not that common. And that's in large part a result to Tom Thibodeau coach teams are going to protect the paint. Tom Thibodeau coach teams are going to be kind of, rough and bruising, and it's not going to be like the prettiest style of basketball. And honestly, like we have some similarities to that as well. I mean, I know we're one of the best teams in the NBA at protecting the paint, and that's a huge emphasis for us every game. how well can we protect the paint? So and you see similarities down the line, in that there some of those old school coaches. Van Gundy is similar. A lot of his philosophy is always bringing in that third defender and always having somebody in the paint. So it's I think that where you see kind of like the lineage and the coaching trees are more so defensively, and then offensively everybody's kind of adapted and adjusted to this new fast-paced 3-point shooting style of NBA basketball, which you pretty much see everywhere now.
Got it. Yeah, super interesting and makes sense. I wanted to also ask you about just going on around the league. Did you see Russ the other night? 35, 21, and 14.
The Russ slander will not be tolerated. I mean, at some point, you just have to sit back and just be in awe. I mean, I know people are always going to say stat padding or he's stat hunting, whatever. I mean, first of all, he did it in a win.
Right.
And they beat a good, indie team. But what he's able to do to step up in Brad Beal's absence, Brad missed that game, and for him to come in and, I don't want to say single-handedly because he did have 21 assists, so somebody has to finish those assists. Yeah. But nonetheless, I mean, that is just an incredible. I just don't think he gets nearly the appreciation that he really deserves.
That is incredible. 35 and 21 assists. If all 21 of those assists are for twos, which they certainly weren't, that's accounting for 77 points. And it surely was more than that. And then you add 14 rebounds in there. It's remarkable.
No, he's been doing it for so long too, which makes it so impressive, is just the longevity. And he does it everywhere he goes. I mean, even last year, it was one of his better, more impressive seasons from a statistical standpoint, just based off of efficiency. And everyone seems to think that he's done and he's washed up. I know there's always going to be people that are going to say, well, until he does it where they win. But the reality is, I mean, he's been on really good teams as well. I think the misconception of pinning it on one player just because they haven't been able to get it done from a championship perspective, it takes so much more than that. Obviously, LeBron is maybe a little bit of an exception, but even LeBron's teams, you see like his first year in LA versus he needed an AD around him. But it's just incredible what he's been able to do at such a high level for such a long time.
Yeah, my quick Russ story is, we've talked about this on the pod, but that summer I was out in Santa Monica helping workout guys for Noah LaRoche and Integrity. Russ was one of the guys who we were working out, and there was a day where he was working on his like short post moves, and so he was like a step off the block, if you can envision, kind of like that short wing area, and he would catch it on like a post and square up, and then he got one dribble to do something, one dribble. And we were sort of taking turns, us guys that were helping out, taking turns guarding him. And somehow it got to the point where like there were other guys in the gym, so the other helpers went somewhere else. So it ended up just being me guarding him at this drill. And he got 20 attempts with one dribble off the block, 20 possessions. And my goal is to guard him as hard as I can, be as physical as possible with him. Fouls were allowed.
Oh dear.
And he scored 19 of the 20 times. And the one he missed was just a step back where I was like under the rim and he was, out near the three because he just bodied me and he just missed it. It was just a wide open shot that he just missed. But so I am never going to be somebody who thinks that I can guard an NBA player anyway. But that was one of those moments where it's just very humbling of like, I legitimately have no chance.
I want to run off that story for a second because I think you bring up an interesting point that I think needs to be addressed to the public in that we've released your high school footage. You were a good high school player. You played college basketball. A very, very small percentage of the basketball population goes on to play collegiately. You are, in all accounts, an above average, very far above average basketball player.
Thank you so much.
There is this misconception among the masses that because you're not an NBA starter or an NBA star or even an NBA rotation player, that if you find yourself on the back of an NBA bench, that you are now somehow a scrub. I just want to address that publicly, and that you've spent a lot of time in gyms with fringe NBA guys, not just Russell Westbrooks, but like guys that are doing everything they can to make it in the NBA.
Yes.
I want you to speak to that. I want you to speak to the skill discrepancy between yourself, who once again, you play a high level of basketball, and those players.
It is massive. Well, I'll say this. The skill discrepancy isn't always massive. Like, you and I talk about this a lot, Dunk, but the difference between Division I and Division III basketball, the skill isn't always the difference. The skill is oftentimes there. Like, you could go to your local rec and find somebody who can shoot the shit out of it. Skill's not always the difference, but for those guys who maybe aren't top tier skill, like, you know, the guys who aren't shooting like Duncan Robinson or handling like Kyrie in the NBA, have something else that's making them incredibly elite. And then you have the guys who have a little bit of both. And Russ certainly falls into that category where he's incredibly skilled and he is an incredible athlete. So I say all that to say, yes, it's just remarkable. And again, me, who I was never a great defender, but I was an above average basketball player, have absolutely no prayer of guarding Russell Westbrook. I have absolutely no prayer of guarding anyone who's playing professional basketball. It takes me to Brian Scalabrine, to Scal, who is notorious for like taking on the local gym guy who thinks he can beat him one-on-one. And then Scal, wins 11-0 against like guys who play in college basketball even.
Yeah.
So yes, it's just, there is a gap.
There's levels to this.
There are levels to this. Yes, 100%.
Scal has a great quote in which he says, I being Scal, I am way closer to LeBron than you are to me.
Right.
Like way closer. So if you guys think of how much better, and I love Scal, that's actually my guy. When you think of how incredible LeBron is compared to Scal, he is way closer to LeBron than your average fan or average basketball player is to Scal.
Yes.
I wanted to address that for a handful of reasons, but the main one being in that I think there's just a huge misconception that there are people that are on NBA rosters that are more than capable of being really good NBA players, but they just haven't had the situation or the opportunity in order to prove so. And I think that as you move up, it's really all levels of all sports, but I think particularly as you move up levels and the skill discrepancy gets tighter and tighter because everybody's so good, it becomes more and more about situation, fit, opportunity, and whether or not you can make the most of those opportunities. Sometimes, especially, depending on who you are, or kind of what precedes you, right? Like where you went to college or how you did in college or where you were drafted. All these types of things contribute to actually getting real opportunity versus maybe getting limited opportunity. But that's just the nature of the business and how it goes.
Yeah. And you've talked about this before, but it's so hard to stay on an NBA roster because there's the youth movement where, the guys are one and done. Like there's so much rotation on the end of a bench that for you to be there, you have to be elite. So it just goes back to your point of like these guys who aren't playing, it's not that they're not good enough. They're good enough. There's a reason they're there. It's just like you said, it comes down to situation and being in the right fit.
When you put your mental and emotional health first, especially in these uncertain times, it has the positive trickle-down effect of making everything else in your life better. Your relationships get stronger and your self-worth grows. These are just a few reasons why working with a therapist to finally prioritize your mental health can truly change your life for the better, across the board.
Well, now there's an easier way to get the help you need with Talkspace. Talkspace lets you send and receive unlimited messages with your dedicated therapist in the Talkspace platform 24/7. With Talkspace, you set goals with your therapist and they hold you accountable and make sure that you're really progressing. Therapy can help you shift your perspective, find tools to cope in difficult times, and really be a guiding light. Plus, it's super affordable and convenient. Talkspace is a fraction of the cost of in-person therapy and has virtual sessions so you can do everything from the comfort of your own home.
And get this, it has thousands of licensed therapists with years of experience in over 40 specialties, including depression, anxiety, substance abuse, trauma, anger management, relationship issues, food and eating, and so much more. So don't wait to seek help. As a listener of this podcast, you'll get $100 off of your first month with Talkspace. To match with a licensed therapist today, go to Talkspace.com. Make sure to use the code LONGSHOT to get $100 off of your first month and show your support for the show. That's promo code LONGSHOT at Talkspace.com. Well, I think this ties in nicely to our Reddit question.
It does. It does, actually. Perfect segue.
Which I'm gonna let you handle.
Yeah, I'll take this. So this one comes from Cultural Role, and they ask, how big is the gap between college and NBA? So we sort of have already hit on that a little bit, but I'd love, Dunk, for your perspective on that. And not so much because we talked just now a little bit about the talent gap, but you can speak to that a little bit, but then also just the difference in the game itself.
I think, stylistically and the actual gameplay, that's one thing that just continues to be super fascinating to me. Especially now in March when I'm watching way more college basketball. Admittedly, like I said before, I haven't watched a lot of college basketball, particularly since I've been in the NBA. But it's so interesting to go back and watch and see how different the game is, the pace, the style of play. I think the biggest one that jumps out is the spacing. I think in college, or I don't think, I know when I watch it, everyone's on top of each other. The paint is so crowded. And the NBA, there's just such an emphasis around spacing. And obviously there's an emphasis around spacing in college as well, but you're just not able to be as effective in your scheming in that, there's no defensive 3 seconds, which I think makes a big difference. The 3-point line being pushed a little bit further, I think makes a big difference. And then of course, just the talent. You'll watch a college game and there might be, one or two guys that can actually create or shoot it. And that's not me coming at college players. Obviously, college basketball is a really high level of basketball. But, in the NBA, there are people out there whose sole job it is to space the floor. And, they can't be given any space. So you're hugged up and that allows, guys like a Jimmy Butler, for example, on our team to play and operate in space. So I think the spacing is the biggest difference from like a style of play standpoint. That and the pace, those are the two big ones. And that's no surprise why you see the scores so low in college, just because it's so much harder to score, because it's so much harder to get into the paint and to be effective. So I think that's a huge one in terms of the actual, players. Obviously the speed, the athleticism and the size. One thing that you see very frequently and commonly in the NBA are rim protectors. And truthfully, there's just not a lot of those in college. But pretty much every team in the NBA has a guy whose job it is they pay to protect the paint. Just because if you're able to protect the paint as a defense, you're doing pretty well. And it's a really hard thing to do, but that's why, shot blocking bigs are so coveted, because they really allow you to anchor a defense. So it's definitely a totally different game. And one thing obviously I've been truthfully a beneficiary of is, people's games fit different levels, are more likely to fit different levels. Like for me, a lot of people say oh, well, your game's perfect for the NBA. And in large part, it's because of the emphasis on spacing and the emphasis on 3-point shooting. Obviously that same stuff is emphasized in college, but it's just taken to a whole different level when you start talking about the NBA.
Question for you, because when I watch, and we talked about this last week, but I watch a lot of NBA and now I'm watching more college than ever because of the tournament. And what is glaring to me is how hard these college guys play every possession. Do you see that too? Or is it a trick being played on the viewer's brain that it's just an uglier game, so it looks like these guys are playing harder. Whereas like in the NBA, it just looks so easy for guys. But I think that might be just because the game is just easier once you're at that level.
It's a combination. I think that college teams in general play really, really hard. I think it's Kenny Smith would always say it, like the TNT halftime. If in the NBA, if you play really hard and that's your identity as a team, you're looking at you can win. You can go 500 just by playing hard. And I think that with that being said, there are a lot of teams in the NBA that play really hard. Like there are. I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, but there are. And I also hate the misconception that NBA teams don't care about defense. That is ridiculous and just a bunch of malarkey.
Yeah, it's just harder to guard James Harden. Like, I'm sorry.
Right. That was the next point I was going to make, in that in college, you're able to crawl into the ball. You're able to press. You're able to pick up full court. You're able to do these things that you just can't do to James Harden. You can't do to Jimmy Butler. You can't do, of course, like to LeBron, like Steph Curry. It's just the skill and the talent is just so elite that it's just so challenging to guard. Like, if you play really good defense in college, you're going to get a stop. Maybe there's a chance, if you protect the paint and do all these things, like, you're going to get a stop. You can play really, really good defense in the NBA, and it just might not matter. Like, the offense might just be better on that possession. And that happens pretty frequently. And that's why you can't get so caught up in stops, but instead just like doing your job and handling, the task at hand, and trying to just limit, make it difficult, right? Like, we talk about this all the time when we play a really good player. You're not going to stop a guy from getting his numbers. Some of these guys, they're going to get their 25, they're going to get their 28 points a game. It's just, how do we make this really difficult for them? How do we make them do it on 22, 23 shots and not, 16, 17, where they're getting to the free throw line and they're also creating for others? So that really becomes a challenge, is like, you're not going to stop anybody. You're not going to shut anybody out, but we just got to make this really challenging and make them operate in space and make it difficult.
Makes sense. Speaking of good offense typically beats good defense, I've seen in media this week with LaMarcus Aldridge going to Brooklyn, there's, a lot of media talking heads like, oh, the rich get richer. They're already by far the best offensive team in the NBA. Now they just add another weapon. They obviously, Brooklyn, are loaded when you look at their roster on paper. When you see a move like that, like, oh, they now have LaMarcus Aldridge, like, do you keep a pulse on that stuff going on around the league, or are you guys just completely focused on what you're doing in Miami? Or is it like, oh shit, oh God, oh Brooklyn, oh man, they're loaded?
No, I mean, you definitely acknowledge that it happens, right? The media, the NBA media train is a ridiculous one. I feel like we've commented on this before, but it's like the game within the game, and there's so much coverage and exposure around it, and particularly because there was a lot of speculation that LaMarcus was maybe going to be coming to Miami. Obviously, that didn't happen. But yeah, I mean, it's you certainly have an eye on it, and particularly in the East, where we came out of the East last year, and we have aspirations and hopes to do the same this year. So that's a potential team that we're looking at. We would have to beat in order to do so. So, I mean, their roster, as you kind of mentioned, is of course loaded. I think I saw like the 41 All-Star appearances between everyone, or right, something like ridiculous like that, and they're I don't know what else to say other than they're obviously, poised to be a tough out in the playoffs. I think that's probably putting it lightly, but I don't think anyone, if you're able to tap into the competitive side of you, views it as insurmountable. I think, everyone's mortal and everyone's beatable.
Good answer. I was just curious.
I don't know.
All right. I'm kind of proud of how long we've been going here. You want to wrap it up though? You want to get to our long shot feature?
Yeah, let's bring this to a close. We got the long shot feature. This one is a particularly relevant one.
Yes.
We got Didi Richards, the point guard for Baylor, who I watched play against the Michigan Wolverines. and the Connecticut Huskies this past weekend. Plays with a lot of heart, but she suffered a spinal cord injury back in October during a practice, and it left her temporarily paralyzed. And there was a lot of confusion and uncertainty around her future and her ability to actually ever be able to play basketball again, let alone, maybe not be potentially physically impaired for her life. And basically over the last couple of weeks, or I should say more than a couple of weeks, couple of months, through extensive rehab and, of course, personal will and dedication, she was back on the court in just 38 days.
Wow.
And this past weekend, the Baylor women's basketball team made it to the Elite Eight, lost in heartbreaking fashion to the Connecticut Huskies. Very controversial call. I don't know if you saw it.
I did.
I think that, I don't think. She definitely got fouled. And yeah, it was, just an unfortunate way for their season to end, but an incredible story for Didi to go from being very uncertain about her playing future to being a key piece on a really good Baylor women's basketball team.
Yep. I will say I'm a proponent of swallowing the whistle late in games, which I know isn't always well received, but I actually do typically stray on not calling the foul. That one's tough, though. It's just...
That was egregious.
I know. It looked like she got mauled a little bit. But did you see Gino after the game? He was, his whole look, there are calls missed all game. All right? I've never seen anyone give a win back because of a missed call. He's like, we're going to take this one, which,
Well, of course. Yeah, you got to take it. But I think a missed call with, 7 minutes to go in the first quarter and, that one late in the game like that are a little bit different. I think it's a little bit of a false equivalence.
One's weighted a little differently.
Yeah, nonetheless, shout out to Didi. She has certainly a bright future ahead of her. Yep. She is this week's long shot feature.
All right, beautiful. Yeah, that's what we got for you. Anything else you want to hit on here?
Not much else. Feel like we had a nice little convo, covered a wealth of different topics.
Yeah, it felt good.
Yeah, another week at the long shot, and we look forward to having you back here next week.
By the way, merch is coming. More merch is coming. I see a lot of people hitting us up on social asking for the Catch I Keep High tees specifically.
Wow.
They're coming. I wish I could give you a date or time, but just know that it's in the works. More are coming.
Love it. Be on the lookout. Catch I Keep High.